This is African American History is American History.
In 1931, Jane Bolin became the first black woman to receive a law degree from Yale and passed the New York State Bar examination in 1932. She practiced with her father in Poughkeepsie for a short period before accepting a job with the New York City Corporation Counsel's office. In 1933, she married attorney Ralph E. Mizell, with whom she practiced law in New York City and permanently relocated there. Mizell would go on to become a member of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's Black Cabinet. This was an informal term coined in 1936 by Mary McLeod Bethune, who served as public policy advisors to FDR and First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt throughout his terms in office from 1933 to 1945. Ralph E. Mizell died in 1943, leaving Jane Bolin to raise their only son, Yorkie B. Mizell, alone. In 1936, Jane Bolin ran unsuccessfully as the Republican candidate for New York's 17th District State Assembly seat. In 1937, Bolin was appointed Assistant Corporate Counsel in New York City's Law Department. This was where she made the most inroads in battling racial inequities by going after private employers to hire people for their qualifications rather than discriminate against their color.
We have to fight every inch of the way, and in the face of sometimes insufferable humiliations.
This is African American History is American History.
Despite having lost the New York State Assembly seat, Jane Bolin's hard-fought campaign boosted her reputation in New York politics. On July 22, 1939, at the New York World's Fair, then New York City Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia appointed the 31-year-old Jane Bolin judge of the Domestic Relations Court.
Well, as time went by, I was embarrassed by it, because it was years after I went on the bench before another African-American woman went on the bench.
20 years, in fact. For 20 years, she was the only black female judge in the entire country. In 1950, Jane Bolin remarried Reverend Walter P. Offutt, Jr. He was a special assistant to the Commissioner for Religious Affairs of the State Division of Human Rights. Reverend Walter P. Offutt, Jr. died in 1974 at the age of 63. Judge Jane Bolin never married again. In 1962, the Domestic Relations Court was renamed the Family Court. Jane Bolin remained a judge of the court for 40 years, with her appointment being renewed 3 times until she was required to retire at the age of 70.
When I came in, the 1 or 2 black probation officers handled only black families. I had that changed.
While on the family court, she worked to encourage racially integrated child services, ensuring that probation officers were assigned without regard to race or religion, and saw to it that publicly funded child care agencies accepted children without regard to ethnic background. Jane Bolin was a staunch activist for children's rights and education. She was also a legal advisor to the National Council of Negro Women. She served on the boards of the NAACP, the National Urban League, and the citywide Citizens Committee on Harlem, as well as the Child Welfare League. In 1950, after having been an active member since 1943, she resigned from the board of the NAACP due to internal strife, including its tepid response to McCarthyism. In her address to the board, Judge Bolin said,
"Since I have been on this board, I have been called on by people who are nationally known in the field of social action to justify the domination of the organization by the staff, which in my estimation is a complete reversal of the traditional functions of the board making policy and the staff executing policy. It is a case of the tail wagging the dog rather than the dog wagging the tail. This creates a reputation for being a supine board of puppets which does everything expected of us by the executive secretary, Walter White, and his staff.
After retiring from the family court in 1979, Jane Bolin remained active in the civil rights movement. She volunteered as a reading instructor in New York City public schools for 2 years and served on the New York State Board of Regents, reviewing disciplinary cases. She also sought to combat racial discrimination from religious groups by helping to open a special school for black boys in New York City. She received honorary degrees from Tuskegee Institute, Williams College, Hampton University, Western College for Women, and Morgan State University. Judge Constance Baker Motley, herself a trailblazer, the first African-American woman to argue a case before the Supreme Court, and the first to serve as a federal judge, saw Jane Bolin as a role model. She said of Judge Bolin,
"Something which we think is impossible now is not impossible in another decade. When I therefore met you, I then knew how a lady judge should comport herself."
After a full life of groundbreaking achievements, Judge Jane Matilda Bolin died on Monday, January 8, 2007, at the age of 98 in Queens, New York. Both Jane Bolin and her father, Gaius C. Bolin, are featured prominently in a mural at the Dutchess County Courthouse in Poughkeepsie, New York, and the Poughkeepsie City School District's administration building is named for her.
This has been African American History is American History.